Do you want to hear a couple of horror stories about first-time homebuyers and even an investor? Well, stay tuned to the end of this video. I've got two horror stories about two buyers and their mistakes that not only they made, but their agents made in not knowing what they were getting into. So make sure you stay tuned to the end so you don't make these same mistakes. This first horror story I'm going to talk to you about happened to a loan officer that's in my branch with one of their clients. Now, it was a first-time home buyer and their agent tried to get creative with the way they structured their offer. Now, of course, in this market, there's usually multiple offers on almost every single home, and you're having to be really aggressive with the way you write your offer up front, which is totally fine. It's normal. We've been seeing that for the last several months. Now, the issue is the agent had written the contract to state that the buyer would pay $10,000 above the appraised value. Now, for those of you that are listening to this and watching this video, as a lender, we will only lend on what the house appraises for, okay? So let's just take an example. Let's say the contract was written for $350,000. The appraisal has to come in at no less than $350,000. If it comes in higher, that's great. That means you're actually walking into some instant equity in your property. If it comes in less, then we have to address the difference, whether the seller drops the price, you as the buyer pay the difference, you guys meet in the middle, or you walk away from the deal. In fact, I've actually done a video about this, so make sure you check out my playlist and look for this video. You can watch the full thing and learn a little bit more about what happens with a short appraisal. The agent had written the contract to state that the buyer will pay $10,000 above appraised value. And guess what? The house appraised for $350,000. And again, I'm just using that number for the sake of this story. They wrote the contract for $350,000. The house actually appraised for $350,000. Now, in a perfect world, the buyer doesn't need to do anything else. The appraisal is good. We can move forward and get the financing done. But in this situation, and why it's a horror story, is the house appraised and the buyer had to still come in with an extra $10,000. Now, you might say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, again, in a perfect world, you don't have to bring in any extra money. So the agent and the buyer didn't fully understand what they wrote down in the contract. The buyer technically didn't even have an extra $10,000 to bring to the deal, and this deal fell apart. The agent wasn't aware of the verbiage that they specifically wrote in the contract. They were assuming the house was going to appraise for less than the $350,000. So the way they wrote the contract, they would have automatically came in with the money in order to keep moving forward and get the deal done. But lo and behold, the house appraised for what they wrote the offer for. And the buyer had to fork up another $10,000 just to get the deal done. So again, I've talked about this in numerous videos. As the buyer, understand what you're signing. Understand the terms of the contract, because this buyer had no idea what he signed. And the agent had basically volunteered the client's money, not knowing what the house was going to appraise for. So you guys have to do your homework. The agent should be doing their comps to make sure, what is the house going to come in at? And as the buyer, ask that question. If you're automatically saying that I'm going to come in with an extra $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, you have to know and be prepared for what is that number going to come in with. And again, this is why a lender is so important when you're getting qualified and you're running these numbers, because you should be having these conversations with your lender. Lender, if my house appraises for $340,000 or $345,000 or whatever number it is, what does that look like? Because per my contract, I'm coming in with X amount of dollars above appraised value. This is why the partnership between a lender and a realtor and you as a buyer is so important. But if all you're doing is chasing the rate, like I said, you're not going to have that conversation. This buyer lost out on that house. The second horror story is regarding an investment purchase. A lot of HOAs here in Las Vegas, especially condos, they have a rental restriction. So what does that mean? They will only allow a certain percentage of the entire project to be turned into rentals. So how do they manage that? They make you go through the HOA to let the HOA know that your unit will be turned into a rental. Then you go into the rental pool. Now, of course, you're not the only investor out there. There's probably a waiting list of investors. Now, where the problem lies is that I had a client once wanted to purchase an investment condo. closed on the unit, then to find out that he had to put his name into the rental pool, and that rental pool was about 2 years long. So he could not rent out his unit for 2 years until his name got called to then rent his unit out. And of course, he went into that purchase thinking that as soon as he closed, he'd get his unit with a property manager, and then they would rent the unit out and he would start making some money. Of course, he didn't do his homework. He didn't do his due diligence. He didn't read the HOA docs. And of course, the agent didn't know that there was a rental pool or any sort of rental restrictions involved in that specific community. So again, if you are an investor or you're a buyer in this market and you're buying from somewhere else in the country, make sure that you're working with an experienced realtor. Make sure that you're working with somebody who understands the market. Those things, I cannot stress to you how important that is, because people make these assumptions that I can rent my unit out, or maybe you're buying an Airbnb and you don't know all the guidelines and restrictions about Airbnbs in Las Vegas. All of these things are gonna lead you down a path where you can't rent your unit out, or all these other restrictions or hoops you need to jump through that you weren't prepared to do. So this guy ended up selling his condo because he just was not prepared to sit on it for 2 years, and him having to make the payments himself. So again, make sure you do your research. Make sure you're working with a knowledgeable realtor and lender, because that teamwork has got to be there for you in order to be successful. Like I've talked about in so many of my other videos, it's not just about getting the deal done. You got to make sure you have the right team with you so you are successful. And as always, if you guys have questions and you guys are looking to purchase, whether it be your first time or if you're an investor, feel free to reach out to us. I'm more than happy to talk to you about how we can help you, some options you have available. And of course, if you're unsure about who to work with as a real estate agent, we have some of our top agents that we can refer to you that I know can help you get the job done. So I appreciate you watching. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.